I'm really excited to say that there are now over 50 of you. The last time I checked, it was 52, and that is just really exciting. So I want to thank you so much for being a subscriber, for watching my videos, and for those of you that leave likes and comments, special thank you to you. So I wanted to do a little bit of a bonus video as a sort of follow-up from what we were talking about yesterday in the latest Poke Studies video. I want to have a look at the breeding map and have a really close look at it and talk about some of the kind of weird stuff that I noticed while I was building that map. So as a reminder, this map includes all of the final stage Pokemon, with one exception that I will get into it. So it only includes final stages, and it only includes one form of each Pokemon. Here in the outer circles, we have the Pokemon that belong to a single group. And then in the lines that connect these circles, the ones that are unlabeled, you have the Pokemon that belong to more than one group. So in this corner, we have the undiscovered group, which is really the only group that is unconnected from the others. And it makes sense. These are all the legendary Pokemon. So they're not Pokemon that, in terms of a game mechanic sense, that you would want to breed. The one weird exception is that we have Nidoqueen here, whereas Nidoran female actually is able to breed, and you can find it in this group along with Nidoking. These are the Pokemon that can breed both with the field group and with the monster group. So it's very unusual that a Pokemon would change groups in this way. Actually, Nidoran female is the only one that begins breedable and ends up not breedable. But since we're talking about the field group, let's have a closer look at who's in it and some of the more unusual things about them. So the concept of the group is fairly straightforward. These are the terrestrial, mostly mammalian kind of Pokemon, but not all Pokemon fit that. So for example, here we have Torkoal, which is terrestrial, yes, but it's not mammalian at all. And it's here by itself, not able to breed with other tortoise or turtle-like Pokemon. A lot of them are in water groups. There's Torterra as well. Torkoal actually can't breed with them, which might suggest that they maybe aren't as closely related as we might think. Also in this group is Blaziken, who is clearly a bird, but is actually not able to breed with the very obviously avian Pokemon of the flying group, which we'll get to soon. And the only other kind of weird Pokemon in this group is Crocodile. So it's not a mammal, it is terrestrial, but again, it isn't able to breed with other crocodile Pokemon like Feraligatr. We do have some other non-mammalian Pokemon that are part of the field group if we go a little bit farther away. Here we have the dragon field group. That does include some reptiles. So it does make a little bit of sense that Crocodile is here. It just seems a little weird that Crocodile isn't able to breed with Feraligatr. If we look at some of these other branches, the field and fairy branch is fairly normal, nothing too exciting here. But then we have the field and water 2 group, which is just Wailord. This isn't too surprising because it shows that Wailord is a mammal. Or a mammalian Pokemon anyway, so it is closely related enough with the field group to breed there. But water 2 is the fishes, and we'll talk more about them later, but it just seems a bit unusual that the whale would be able to breed with the fishes. On the field and water 1 group, we have some more aquatic mammals, but we also have Delibird for some reason, and not in the flying group. Same with Empoleon, which it seems really strange. Having Golduck here, though, now that I find very interesting, because my interpretation of Golduck is that it's not a duck, is that it's actually more of a platypus. So having it be an aquatic mammal grouped with several other aquatic mammals makes total sense. Now, it doesn't really make sense to put these aquatic mammals with Water 1, because the Pokemon that are naturally in the Water 1 group, the Pokemon that are only in the Water 1 group, are kind of a weird assortment of Pokemon. There's several frogs, there's a couple of fish, there's some echinoderms. But anyway, it's just not a very consistent group, so I guess it's okay to put some of the mammals in there. If we look at the next branch of field, this is the field and monster group where we found the Nidorans before. Not too exciting. Everyone here is pretty understandable. Here in the field and human-like group, again, nothing too exciting. Everyone is fairly human-like and is a terrestrial mammal, so we can move on from that. In the grass and field group, we have Shiftry, which I find very interesting that it's not in the human-like group. I would think that it's more human-like than any just terrestrial mammal. But we also do have Serperior here, which means that Serperior is able to breed with Arbok and Seviper, so at least it keeps that consistent. Now, in the last branch of the field group, we have the flying and field group, where we find Farfetch'd, which seems a little far-fetched, honestly. I don't really know why Farfetch'd would be grouped with any terrestrial Pokemon at all. But having Swoobat here does make sense because Swoobat is a bat and therefore mammalian. But it's also a flying type, which makes sense that it would be grouped with the flying types. Although, moving on to the flying group, if we have a close look, we see that almost every Pokemon on here is a bird. So maybe it doesn't make as much sense to have Swoobat be able to breed with the birds. And it makes even less sense to have Crobat here, because Crobat isn't in a shared group. It's only in the flying group. So I don't know what that's about. Another Pokemon that doesn't make too much sense to be grouped with the flying types is Aerodactyl, because you might expect it to be grouped with the dragons. Same with Noifern, which is actually a dragon, but none of these can breed directly with the dragon group. Altaria can though, so that at least provides a bridge between the birds and the dragons. Togekiss is by itself providing the bridge between the flying group and the fairy group, which obviously makes sense. Pelipper and Swanna provides the bridge to the Water 1 group, which again is a very mixed group. It makes sense that they would be together, but I don't know if it really makes sense for them to be in Water 1. But I don't know if anything really makes sense in Water 1. Now, the really strange one for me is Archeops, which of course makes sense to be in the flying group, but why exactly is it in Water 3? Water 3 is a group that has a lot of fossils in it, so I guess that makes sense, but I still don't see how Archeops is supposed to breed with them. If we move on again to the grass group, now these are the living plants, and in a couple of cases, the living fungi, which makes perfect sense. I'm not surprised to see Lurantis on here, since Lurantis is based on a flower and not on an actual mantis. Lurantis is not a bug, so that makes perfect sense. The one that stands out to me, though, is Comfey, because Comfey is a pure fairy type. It doesn't even have the grass type. And we're told that Comfey's flowers are just things it collects and not actually part of its body. So it would make sense to me to see Comfey in the fairy group entirely and not at all connected to the grass group, or maybe in both, but it seems really unusual, really strange to see it only in the grass group. We do have some grass fairies, which mostly makes sense. The one that seems a little unusual to me is Breloom. I might have put Breloom either in the field group or maybe even in monster or dragon, but fairy does seem a bit off. If you look at Shroomish, maybe it makes a little more sense, but with Breloom as the final stage, it seems strange. In another branch of the grass group, we have Trevenant making the bridge to the Amorphous group, which is where most of the ghosts are, so yeah, that makes sense. In the next branch of the grass group, we have Parasect making the bridge to the bug group. Now this one I find very peculiar because we know that the real Pokemon controlling, or that the real organism controlling this Pokemon is the mushroom. So it makes sense that it would be in the grass group, that the mushroom is actually what is breeding. But it's also able to breed with the bugs. I don't know exactly how that is supposed to work. Is the mushroom controlling the bug body to breed with other bugs and actually allowing those bug genes to be passed along. That's extremely disturbing. Ludicolo making the bridge to the Water 1 group, that makes sense. Besides a grass Pokemon, I don't really know what Ludicolo is supposed to be, but it is aquatic, so sure, we'll let it breed with the Water 1 group. That's sure. In the branch of grass and monster, we have a bunch of kind of dinosaur-y Pokemon, as well as Abomasnow, which I guess it is a monster if it's the abominable snowman. Again, though, we do have Torterra here, unable to breed with some of the other turtle Pokemon, so that's a bit unusual. The grass and human-like Pokemon branch only has Cacturne in it, which seems fine, and the grass and mineral branch only has Ferrothorn in it, which again seems fine. Now the mineral group is made up of a bunch of Pokemon that you probably would not expect to be able to breed at all because they're all rocks or otherwise inanimate. It does seem a little unusual, a little strange to see that ice-bodied Pokemon like Vanillix and Cryogonal are included in here as well, but I guess you could say ice is kind of like rock. I don't really know. But the really weird one for me, there are two of them. The first one is Shedinja. Shedinja is genderless, so it isn't able to breed with anything here. A lot of the other Pokemon on here are genderless as well, so they aren't actually able to breed with each other. But it still seems strange to have Shedinja, the shell of a bug, grouped for breeding purposes with the rocks. I mean, it would make sense to have it in the Amorphous group where the ghosts go, but it's here instead. The other unusual one is Delmise, because Delmise, at least we're told, is actually the seaweed on the anchor. So why exactly isn't it in the grass group? What makes a wooden anchor covered in seaweed a mineral? Now, if we look at some of the branches of the mineral group, we have Cofagrigus making the bridge to Amorphous, which makes sense if Cofagrigus' body is mostly the actual sarcophagus. Then I guess I can see how that would be a mineral. In the mineral and fairy group, we have the two Snorunt evolutions as well as the very obvious one, Carbink. Nothing here really stands out to me. I am not sure why Snorunt is considered a mineral, but okay, it is one of the icy ones, so at least it's consistent. And in the mineral and bug group, we have Crustle, which is, I think, pretty self-explanatory. So we can move on to human-like. Human-like is a pretty straightforward group to define, but it does still have some very surprising inclusions. So here we have Hypno, which is very human-like, so I don't contest its inclusion here, but I'm surprised that it's not in field, since it is based on a tapir, which is a terrestrial mammal. I'm also surprised to see Sableye on here. I guess it's human-like enough, but I would have expected it to be in Amorphous. I think the most surprising inclusion on here is Krogunk, because it's not able to breed with the other frogs. Those are all in Water 1. Electivire, I'm a little surprised by. I probably would have put it in a crossover with Field, but that's okay. Now, Magmortar, I don't understand how it's not a bird. The Japanese names of this family are based on booby, as in the bird, and it obviously has those duck-like beaks, so I don't really know how it's more human-like than bird-like. Maybe being in both would have made sense. Now, the one that I think is the most interesting on here is Hawlucha. One of the big qualms I've always had with Hawlucha as a design is that it looks more like a person wearing a bird suit than a Pokemon. Seeing it here, I'm kind of vindicated because it's not included in the flying group. It's only included in human-like. So it's not really a bird at all. It is like a human dressed as a bird. The only branch of human-like that we haven't addressed is the human-like and bug cross, which has Volbeat and Illumise. Seems normal, nothing really to comment on here, so we can move on to Monster. In Monster, we have mostly the kind of kaiju-looking Pokemon. I don't think anything that is included in only Monster is anything to stand out, but I do want to point out that both Marowak and Kangaskhan are here. So that's just another bit of evidence in favor of the theory of Cubone being a baby Kangaskhan. In one of the biggest branches of this breeding map, we have the Monster and Dragon cross, which is not really surprising at all. They're all kind of Draconids. I don't really know why Monster is a separate group from Dragon. For the most part, I think they would be fitting in the Dragon group. Marowak and Kangaskhan maybe less so. Those could be included in Field. But anyway, none of these Pokemon that are in the Dragon and Monster are really surprising. In the group that makes the bridge between Monster and Water 1, we have, again, some some weird assortments. We have crocodile, a turtle, whatever the slowpoke evolutions are supposed to be, and then Lapras and Swampert. I can see why they're all in Monster. It's just these water groups are just so inconsistent. Which brings us to Water 3. Water 3 and Water 1 are just a mess. Like, Water 3 does have the crabs, but then it also has Tentacruel and Starmie, and I just don't understand. If you include all the branches of Water 3 though, then you do get this Water 1, Water 3 cross that has a lot of fossils. So things do start to look a little bit more consistent. If you're an aquatic fossil, you're going to be in Water 3. Still doesn't explain Archeops though. And you also have this branch that makes the bridge from Water 3 to Bug, which includes Drapion, which of course isn't a bug type, but is very clearly a bug. If we move on to Water 1, the Water 1 and Amorphous group includes Gastrodon and Stunfisk. I guess it kind of makes sense to have Gastrodon in Water 1 and in Amorphous. I don't really know why Stunfisk is here, since it's clearly a fish. Another branch of Water 1 is Water 1 to Fairy, which includes Manaphy. Manaphy is a bit weird because it can only breed with Ditto, and it is a legendary, but it's actually included in 2 other egg groups. Having Azumarill in the Fairy group makes perfect sense. In the branch from Water 1 to Bug, we have, very unsurprising, 2 aquatic bugs. The branch from Water 1 to Water 2 also doesn't make a lot of sense. It's got 2 fishes, an octopus, and a squid. Having the 2 fishes connect to the fishes makes perfect sense. I don't really know why any of these are connecting to the frogs and echinoderms. Water 2, thankfully, is a very consistent water group. It's the only one that is consistent at all. And in the last branch we haven't talked about yet for Water 2, we have Gyarados, which of course connects to the dragon group, and both of those seem to make sense. If we move on to the bug group, nothing really to be surprised by here, but there are a couple things that I wanted to point out. In particular, that Flygon and Gliscor are included here. I do find it surprising that Gliscor isn't in Monster and that Flygon isn't in Dragon, but I do not find it surprising at all that they're in Bug, even though neither of them are bug types. The only branch of bug we haven't talked about yet is Ribombee, which is Bug Fairy in both type and in egg group, so that's nothing really to be surprised by. The Fairy group is relatively small, but a surprising number of the Pokemon there aren't actually Fairy type. For example, you have Blissey and Audino, which I would definitely consider fairies, but they're not Fairy type. I'm actually kind of surprised that they didn't get the Fairy type. The ones that I actually do find surprising are Pluzzle and Minun, because they're here in Fairy and not in Field. As we see here in the Fairy and Field mixed group, there's a lot of Pikachu clones that are on here. A lot of the electric rodents are in both, but I don't understand why Pluzzle and Minun aren't in Field. The only branch of Fairy we haven't talked about is the Fairy and Amorphous group that only includes Castform, which I think is fairly self-explanatory. It's definitely pretty shapeless, but it also is kind of fairy-ish, so that's alright. The Amorphous group is literally the shapeless Pokemon, so it includes a lot of ghosts, some artificial Pokemon that just have no set form like Muck and Swalot. Most of the inclusions here make sense. I do find it very unusual though that Gardevoir and Gallade are in here and not in, for example, the Fairy group or the human-like group, both of which would have made a lot of sense. I don't find either of them are shapeless at all, and if you look at them compared to the other Pokemon that are on here, it doesn't really make sense. The other odd inclusion here is Electros. I would have probably expected it to be in one of the water groups since it is based on a lamprey, which is a very ugly type of fish, but still a type of fish. I'm also a little surprised to see Gourgeist on here and not in the grass group at all. I can understand it being here, I don't understand it not being in grass. And the last group is Dragon. It's the smallest group of exclusive breeding Pokemon, and they're all pseudo-legendaries. But nothing here is too surprising, obviously they're all dragons. I do find it slightly surprising that Goodra is included only here and isn't able to breed with other snail-like Pokemon, like Excelgor, for example. So that's it. That's everything that I noticed about the breeding map. If you noticed anything that I missed, let me know. If you want to find explanations for these weird relationships or lack of relationships, go ahead. Let me know in the comments. I would love to see what you have to say. I might actually do some of them myself. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you again for being a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber yet, that's okay. You can become one now. I won't judge. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. I'm Umbreon Libris, and I'll see you in the next chapter.